Good afternoon, panel. This is Team RT3 from IIT Madras, and we are going to present our solutions on the emissions and reduction in losses. Next slide, please. So our first problem statement was to find out the major contributors in Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. And we could find the following, that Scope 1 emissions refer to direct emissions from sources within the facility, and Scope 2 emissions refer to indirect emissions, mainly from electricity and hydrogen from the steam reformer that Chevron imports. So the next part of comparing Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions with and without installation of PV panels will be done by Shyam. So over to Shyam.
Thank you, Lakshita. We'll now see at the initial carbon dioxide emission calculations. The power generated from PG&E electricity generation grid is approximately 38.71 million kilowatt hours. We are calculating the power number of metric tons of carbon dioxide per year using the emission factor of carbon dioxide. Next up, we have the net oil production from Chevron Lost Hills field. This data has been taken from a data file from a methane calculation. So all the carbon dioxide emission has been summed up, and the total carbon dioxide emission along with the PV along with the power generation from PG&E is calculated to be 51 lakhs, 5 lakhs 18,188.677 metric tons of CO2 equivalent per year. After installation of PV panels, the expected reduction of carbon dioxide will be around 3.82%. And after installation of PV panels plus battery storage, the expected reduction will be 4.34%. This number may be small, but over a long period of time, say over 20 years, the net reduction of carbon will be around 10 lakh metric tons of CO2 equivalent per year. Move on to the next slide. The impact of solar energy. We have seen the impact of solar energy to be the increase in NCFS credits due to the reduction of carbon dioxide emissions and the reduction of carbon dioxide from grid electricity generation, that is from the PG&E generation. So what are the next steps? We still do have problems. Some of the problems include reducing methane emissions and controlling carbon dioxide emissions from flaring, venting, and testing. So these are operations inside the oil field. From this slide, we can see that among the energy sector, the major contributors of methane emissions are oil industry next to natural gas industry. So for this methane emission problem, we have come up with a solution of incorporating the molten carbonate fuel cell system within the oil field system. So the molten carbonate fuel cell system takes in inputs as hydrogen in the form of methane and carbon, electricity and water. The recycled carbon dioxide is pure in form and stored as underground carbon dioxide. If we take a 1 megawatt power output of a molten carbonate fuel cell system, it can capture carbon dioxide amount of 20,075 metric tons per year. This is a very considerable amount considering the effect of solar PV panels and other carbon capture methods. The average setup and maintenance cost of a fuel cell stack will be around $3,000 per kilowatt, considering materials cost, overhead cost, and balance of plants cost. Next over to Manjari.
So now we come into the next part of the solution. The output we get from the fuel cell as pure CO2 can be stored by carbon sequestration. Here CO2 is injected into the saline formation or coal beds. This helps in mitigating carbon dioxide contribution to global warming. Next slide. Uh, so Lost Hills is located in the western part of
And please start wrapping up.
Okay. So we look into the geological data and we find that there's 90% probability to find a suitable location for carbon sequestration. Next slide, please. For initial pilot stage, we need to get samples and make sure the porosity and permeability is of the right um, factor. And we might have to drill up to 4,000 feet to completely evaluate the soil profile, as you can see on the right. This was done in Arizona and which has similar soil profile to the current location. Next slide. Looking on a complete, looking around the complete region, we can find that we have to check for containment risk and storage capacity, injectivity, and other uh, pressure differences. So the distance from the fault also make the plant safety. Next slide, please. We have components for the injection well and as well for monitoring purposes. Here CO2 injection wells are the most significant investment, and we also need carbon dioxide pipeline to transport it from the plant to the sequestration facility. We need to keep monitoring the pressure buildup inside the sequestration storage. Next slide. So when we consider the sequestration done only from concentrated carbon dioxide from the fuel cell, we expect a reduction in emission by 4.34%. But we can also include carbon dioxide which doesn't go through the fuel cell system. Over to Lakshita.
Next slide, please. So we had also looked at a second solution that was to partially replace the lithium-ion batteries being used with refurbished batteries, because for EVs the requirement is that 80% of the total usable capacity should be there. So these batteries have enormous potential for reuse in stationary storage, as they bring down storage costs and can help integrate more renewable power into the grid. Due to lack of time, we'd be wrapping up by saying that we found that the number of vehicles from which we need batteries would be 4,65,000 to have a energy that is supplied to Lost Hills being supplied by them. Next, please.
Yeah, we do have to wrap this up because the time limit was
so
5 minutes.
This is the graph, and these were the solutions that we found. Thank you.
All right, so now I'll start the timer for the judges' Q&A.
Okay, hey, thanks for the presentation. And I know we had some challenges with time management. You might want to list all your solutions up front and prioritize them by the potential impact before you get into the details. Then at least, you know, the judges can at least see your thinking there. I was curious on, so the first two solutions that you presented, one was this molten carbonate and the other was CO2 sequestration. Can you just give rough order of magnitude, the impact of those two on an oil field?
Yeah, okay. Coming to the molten carbonate fuel cell project, as I already discussed in this slide, let me get back to the slide.
I just think, you know, is one 10 times more impactful than the other? What's your sense of those two?
Okay, so the conventional carbon capture and sequestration methods, they like the molten carbonate fuel cell systems are far better than the conventional carbon capture and storage systems.
Okay.
One reason for this is the electricity generation for molten carbonate fuel cell. The electricity generation is done by themselves. It is an auto power generated fuel cell system, whereas we have to input electricity for the conventional carbon capture methods.
I see. And what's the state of commercialization of this molten carbonate fuel cell?
The state of commercialization, this molten carbonate fuel cell is commercialized in quite a few coal and thermal power plants, but not in any oil and gas firms as of now. It is also under huge research and development because this is a very viable solution for carbon capture and storage. If we use it in the oil and gas firms, probably we'll be the first company to um, like we'll be an example for to foregoing companies, future companies.
I see. Thank you.
This similar process has been suggested in a plant in Alabama, like, but research is still going on into the facility.
I guess maybe just make one more comment, then Kamal, you can ask questions. So, but this one, the input is methane. So I was trying to figure out
for
why
this molten carbonate fuel cell, the inputs are methane and carbon dioxide.
Okay,
So
okay,
basically, we can also have stack gases going into the cell instead of methane. So that would be the use for oil and gas industries.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for an excellent research that you have done, identifying opportunities as well. That's very similar to Barbara's question on the impact for the multiple solutions that you proposed on the lost hills itself. And if you try to quantify first on the volume of emissions reduction and then the economics, how would you rank them? So, sorry, I might have missed it if you had it in your presentation. So you have multiple solutions, right? So how would you rank them based on emissions reductions and the financial viability?
So I would just like to make this point that the first and the second solution that have been provided are, they go together. So the carbon that has been generated from the fuel cell goes into the sequestration, the ground.
So, but you also had the carbon coming from the operations going into sequestration as well as a different stream on your chart, right? If I'm not mistaken.
So the carbon coming from the plant goes into the fuel cells, which then goes into the ground. I mean, is sequestered into the ground.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, yeah, so that is just about time up. Thank you very much for your presentation and good